And since we are already getting a late start on this, my apologies. I suggest we bang the gavel and get started right away. And we're here today to hear testimony from at least three people who signed up in advance. Testimony is always open to others. If you would like to make out a pink slip and bring it up to here, we can make sure that we get your testimony as well. And without further ado, let's just get started. I'd like to hear from Clark first, pardon me.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And if you could push the red button on your microphone once you get settled, and then state your complete name and title for the record. Thank you.
For the record, my name is Clark Corson. I am co-founder with Carol Foss, who sits to my immediate right, of a New Hampshire nonprofit called Collaborative Solid Waste Strategies. And we are focused on education, advocacy, and innovation, meaning looking outside the box to find alternate ways to landfills and incineration. Plastics is a vital component of trash. People who speak behind me today are much more qualified to address the particulars and the percentages of trash and so forth. Carol, can I see just that? Thanks, I forgot this. I've provided written testimony. I'm not going to take up a lot of your time because others will more specifically address the nuances of what I'm aiming at, but extended producer responsibility in the big scheme of things is a relatively new concept. It shifts the burden from the consumer to the manufacturer, which is what Europe has done for 5 years and what Canada just passed about 3 weeks ago. There are 23 bills presently pending in our five New England states that comprise New England. 23 bills presently being considered. 8 of those bills are seriously being considered and will probably get passed this year. 2 in Connecticut, 3 in Massachusetts, 1 in Vermont, and I think 1 in Maine. I hope from the bottom of my heart that this committee at least allows the full lower chamber to have a look at the nuances and the goodness and the demerits of what the proposed bill may offer. I think the full House deserves to hear, and I think you as a committee, eyeball to eyeball, have an obligation to let them debate it. I understand that of the 4-person committee, it is split down the middle in terms of whether you want to pass it over there. It bothers me, quite frankly, that of a 400-person House, it comes down to 4 people making that decision, irrespective of how you come down on it. This is a matter of serious, it can't be any more serious. I have testified numerous times on setbacks from standing bodies of water, of landfills, and so forth. I will just share this with you briefly. When I started lobbying here in 1971, I was the executive director and lobbyist for the beer industry in New Hampshire. I fought my living tail off to defeat bottle bills. But lots of things happen in a half a century. And I'm here today to tell you that New Hampshire is way behind the 8 ball in terms of seriously addressing the issue of solid waste, the climate, leachates, soil, carbon footprints. These are all new terms that weren't around 50 years ago. 50 years ago, it was about litter. Elmer Johnson was a representative. in charge of the E&R committee, and he was a farmer and said that his milk was tasting tinny because the cows were eating so many aluminum cans. In those days, actually, there were steel cans. But then it became solid waste, not litter so much, but solid waste, recycling, redemption. Today, you have this plastic council in New Hampshire who cares enough about sustainable solid waste management to have invested their time, effort, and research. And I ask you to at least let the full House consider the merits of their arguments. There are 2 points I've been asked to make. I'm rambling, so my mother is telling me what I should do here. I'm going to read these. And this is my testimony. A Canadian study compared prices of common consumer products at retailers in paired cities with and without EPR in eastern, central, and western Canada, and found no correlation between product prices and the presence or absence of EPR. That is cited as a reference in my testimony. A Columbia University study, Bose 2022, estimated the impact of EPR regulation on prices of packaged consumer goods based on food price elasticities and USD estimates of packaging costs. This study concluded that packaging costs constituted approximately 2.3% of food expenditures and estimated that food prices would increase less than 1% of the EPR regulations were implemented. Now, I just want to say one thing about that statement in and by itself. If it does cost 1%, so what? %, so what? What does it cost to handle solid waste? Our state is so far behind our sister states, particularly Vermont and Maine, as it applies to things such as this. Gene Shaheen tried to get a solid waste master plan passed in 2002. Just this past October, Mike Nork is here, I think he'll testify to this, did the state finally, through the legislature, enact a solid waste master plan. Maybe that's why 50+% of the trash going into New Hampshire landfills comes from Massachusetts. Vermont insists that it be sanitized and doesn't allow it. Maine doesn't allow it. New Hampshire allows it because we did not be proactive. We sat back and I guess we didn't just take it seriously enough. I hope that you take plastics more seriously, because this is a time to do it. On this bright October morning, you can make a difference. Second point, EPR programs cost to producers are extremely low. The Natural Resources Council of Maine used the fee schedule for Quebec's EPR program and measured weights of 14 different packaging materials to calculate stewardship fees per package. They got right down in the weeds. These fees range from 0.006 to 0.032 for paper and cardboard, and 0.001 to 0.013 for various plastics. So you can argue about the dimensions of cost until the cows come home. I don't know how relevant that is in the big scheme of things when New Hampshire has become the trash dump for other New England states. So I'll simply leave you with the thought that the ball is in your hands. As a courtesy to the balance of the members in the House, I hope you will allow them to debate the issue before New Hampshire falls even further behind. Whether it be the solid waste master plan, whether it be the fact that our landfills are now accepting Massachusetts trash, Maine trash, Vermont trash, and if the Bethlehem project goes through, northern New York trash as well. That's not the issue here today. The issue is what component of solid waste can this committee address today? Thank you.
Thank you. And I'd ask the committee if there are questions. Okay, I would like to ask a couple questions, if I may.
I'll try to answer them. I'm not sure.
I know we all try, but this is education very much for us. So, you said there's 23 bills considered in our New England region. Quite a few may see the light of day this coming within the year. Do you see other states passing this type of legislation? Does that have a detrimental effect on what we're receiving in New Hampshire, potentially? I mean, as far as our waste flow is concerned?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
With other states passing EPR legislation?
Can I have,
Oh, by all means, yes.
A little bit hard of hearing too, so.
Oh, no, yes, by all means, and please introduce yourself. And then,
Carol Foss, Executive Director of Collaborative Solid Waste Strategies.
yes, thank you, and thank you again for both appearing. My concern is if we're the last state to pass EPR legislation, that will make us more vulnerable to what waste flow they're shipping in from other states. Where if we get ahead of the game by passing EPR sooner, we will have some protection in managing that waste flow. Is that reasonable?
I think if other states adopt EPRs, then I would think that those states, people in those states, transfer stations in those states would be recycling the materials that have EPRs. So if it's mattresses, if it's batteries, if it's used paint, whatever, people are gonna, individuals from other states are not personally bringing their trash to New Hampshire. It's going to a transfer station. And it's those transfer stations that are contracting with somebody to move that waste from the transfer station to wherever, to a landfill, to an incinerator, to New Hampshire, to whatever. So if those states have an EPR law, then those transfer stations are going to be the ones kind of managing where those materials go. So they will not be coming to New Hampshire.
Thank you. One further question. I'll try to be a little more succinct. You were talking about the 1% cost, which I consider to be quite light. But could that 1% cost even be offset by potential reduction in municipal taxes?
I'll answer that one. I can assure you, and I don't think there would be much argument from either side, that manufacturers have already built into their cost of doing business the anticipation of EPR regulation in our state. And I can tell you that when the bottle bills were passed in Maine, Vermont, Massachusetts, and Connecticut, the cost of relabeling containers was built in. New Hampshire, of course, with no sense of broad-based taxation, fully jumped on that to take advantage of out-of-state sales. So to Carol's point, would more be coming to New Hampshire if New Hampshire did not adopt that? I don't know the answer to that. I would think that manufacturers would have to have, I can't believe that they would have 13 states here, 4 states there in the Midwest doing one thing and other states not doing another. That's how I would have answered your first question. But they build into the cost of doing business, and that's why I tend to minimize the fact that a 1/10 of 1%, if that's the cost to a consumer, it is going to be there regardless.
Thank you. Any further questions? Thank you both. Next, I would like to hear from Cynthia Walter.
Just have to set up.
And we have done this before, one of our prior committees, where we have one screen to share. Would anybody be opposed if I invited those who would like to sit and observe the screen to come forward? That's fine with that? Well, if you'd like to come in so I can see the screen, as we did last time if you were here.
It'll give us a quorum.
Yeah, we have a quorum, actually. Mm.
Oh, I see it, yeah. I mean, I don't see anything on it yet. Is it showing up yet? I think I need to wake it up.
I thought this wake up and plugged it in, but.
Well, we may not have a show. Oh, here it comes. There you go. It's working, yeah. Finally it is. Woke up.
Sorry, I didn't know it was happening until you figured it out.
Thank you, John. This takes a minute to open these things up sometimes and have them respond to you.
Take all the time you need, no
Hold
problem.
on. It's not giving me that option, huh? Slideshow. From beginning, it's just not giving me that option. Here, let me just open up another version of this. My computer's just knocking out on me. Sorry about that. I had it all set up here. Yeah, it's, I mean, it wouldn't give me full screen. I think I just need to pull it up in a different window or something. I'll just pull it up out of my files. Here's the PDF, PowerPoint. And this should work. I'm sorry about the wait. So I'm Cynthia Walter. I'm the co-director of the Dover, New Hampshire, Dover Plastics Reduction Group in Dover, New Hampshire. And my screen is just really knocked out here. Help me.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I don't know where.
I can try.
Yeah, can you give me a hand here? Right, so I will be able to email my testimony to you, and I do have the PowerPoint slides that I have packets for you folks to take home, and maybe one to send to the one member of the four-person committee who's not here today. So we'll have those ready for you in just a second. We'll have the,
I'm gonna just close these out. Try it.
yeah, thank you, John.
Oh, you're welcome, of course.
Let's see if it's getting working. So again, I thank you for your effort in working on this difficult problem. I'm a scientist, retired after a 35-year career in teaching and research with a focus on pollution problems and solutions.
Excuse me.
Producer responsibility laws.
Excuse me?
Hello?
I'm going to ask you to turn that microphone more towards yourself, if you do not
Right,
mind.
I'm sorry. Yes, so I'm sorry. So I'm a scientist retired after a 35-year career in teaching and research with a focus on pollution problems and solutions. Extended producer responsibility laws provide important opportunities to develop solutions to our expanding problems of waste and exposures to toxins. If you have any questions, I'm available. The exposure to toxins is the focus of my talk today. So that's the one, yes, exactly. So, I'll just stay standing. So we have savings that we will have from safer packaging. And I want to show you how we can limit toxics in New Hampshire laws. There'll be more market share, savings throughout the packaging lifetime, more confident consumers, and improved company health because things will be safer for the products themselves, and improvements in personal health because they'll be safer for your family. So let's start at the beginning. What do we have here? Well, let's go through a few problems and then some solutions. So problem number one, some packaging contains toxins banned in 19 states and all of Europe. So we already have in New Hampshire plastics liner in coffee cups that contains PFAS. That you can see this plastic melted liner has then is something that we're drinking liquid out of, warm liquid. Not a good idea. So also containers now we know can leach harmful chemicals exceeding the safe limits for baby foods. So we have those in our stores. Our parents are buying these things for their little tiny babies. We have toxic metals in packaging spreading into products made from recycling. Now, I'm aware that we have a 1996 law in New Hampshire. We were very forward-thinking in 96 to have a law that bans some metals in some kinds of some packaging. So we have a start at that already. And no one probably noticed too much about the problems in 1996 associated with the cost issues. They simply said, heavy metals are toxic. We have to take them out of our packaging. We have to take them out of our exposures. That's the more important thing to focus on. And we did it in 1996. But we stopped with just a few of those things for a few situations associated with products and packaging. EPR now can make that be stronger. So the second problem, each business is now paying to spend money on handling problem chemicals at every step in the supply chain. So they're already paying for this. And with EPR, across New Hampshire and across other states as well, this actually streamlines business operations and reduces much of their paperwork and worker exposures. Problem 3, toxics contaminate products, people in the environment, and recycling. To begin, the products. The products contain, right now, if you look around you, over 10,000 different additives, 4,000 of which have not been studied, but for those that have been studied, over 1,000 showed up to be of high health concern. They're in the things we have around us now. The known impacts from these, and again, this is just, I didn't cherry pick the data and the impacts I'm citing. These are cited again and again. Infertility. Sperm count in the United States and other developed countries has declined by over half. These things are called the diseases of the developed world, and infertility is a major problem. Impaired nervous systems. We're seeing more and more people with learning disabilities coming along, and it's a tragedy, and maybe an unnecessary tragedy to happen. Cancer. Many cancers are triggered by chemical additives, and now cancer is among the top cause of death in children for disease. So that's problem 3A. Problem 3B, the toxins keep going. Again, they contaminate the food in our plastics, especially recycled plastics, and even the baby food, like I cited before. Toxics contaminate the food chain, so that when people come to New Hampshire for our wonderful fishing and our wonderful wildlife and so forth, and they eat those fish, they eat the wildlife, we want to make sure that those things are safe, those animals are safe for them, for people to eat. Toxics contaminate our landfill leachates. So we hope that our landfills don't leak, but we all know, first of all, the leachate that we do collect from landfills has to be then treated for these accelerated, very difficult to handle toxics. When we put more toxics into the landfill, the leachate toxics go up. The landfill right near my house, Turnkey Landfill, 7 of the 10 test wells had PFAS in them. I mean, there's just all the time. And now all that has to be treated in advanced ways. So these are expenses that we are paying, that I'm paying for my city's tipping fees, because the landfill has to treat its leachate to this advanced level. I mean, the costs keep going. If the landfills leak, then heaven only help us, you know. Now, problem number 3C. Chemical recycling spreads the toxics and forms new toxics. So here's how it works. The advanced recycling or chemical recycling facility begins with a mixture. These eye-popping containers that probably are using some metals and other interesting, maybe toxic chemicals to make this such a bright color. Fabric, like this carpet, that's all plastic. This material that came in a balance that my husband bought at Target. All these things are going to get put into the hopper in a chemical recycling facility. And out comes, well, during that reaction, a lot of these chemicals get collected, but also new chemicals are formed, some of which we know as serious toxins, and 140 different ones, by the way, and some of which we don't even know the names of yet because we haven't had time to study all this. Then the products from that are condensed into either of two products, actually two products, plastics and fuel. In New Hampshire, that fuel can be allowed to be burned within the facility. That's our law for advanced recycling, allows that fuel from this process to be burned within the facility. If you want to burn it elsewhere and sell it and burn it elsewhere, then that's not called advanced recycling, that's just called pyrolysis and waste incineration. Both of those processes are now allowed in New Hampshire. If you want to sell the plastics out of this, then those plastics go on and become a desirable product. And here's a bottle that I found as road trash in front of my house. It advertises 100% recycled plastic. That's a lovely concept. However, if this recycled plastic is that recycled plastic, I don't think I want to drink this water because I don't know what will be in it. It has come from all this other stuff. I don't know what it is. Furthermore, that plastic is turned into recycled plastic toys. So do I want my 1-year-old grandson? Do I want him to be chewing on this? I don't think so. So we have to stop and say, these problems associated with underregulated waste cannot continue. I know you can say, well, this is expensive, it's complicated, but this is too important to just wait for further decisions. We can take charge of this, and that's where I want to get to my solutions. So, the solution, the New Hampshire NHEPR can begin to limit the toxics. There are less toxic solutions available. For example, the BPA was removed. As soon as we found out that it impaired your reproductive abilities and had some cancer effects and so forth, they came out of the bottles, and no bottle cost any more. The manufacturers didn't have to pay much for this because the chemists could easily figure out a pathway to produce these bottles without the BPA. That was just one problem. So safer packaging will create jobs. Here's a fantastic opportunity for our state. We have so many waste wood resources here. Because of our active timber industry, there's a lot of waste wood. We also have active agriculture that will have waste agricultural natural materials. All those natural materials are non-toxic packaging. This could be packaging production central for non-toxic packaging. And we just have to, continue to develop that industry. It's starting, but we can develop it more here. Our NHPR is the next step you can open up to take. We've already started with the ban toxics in metals of 96. We can keep going. We can look at Maine's EPR. They're smart, and Granite Staters, I think, are just as smart as the Mainers, eh? So we can ban major persistent toxics, the PFAS and the heavy metals. We can restrict health hazard chemicals such as the phthalates and the BPA and so forth. They have a very concise way of phrasing it in the law there. They allow in the law a very clever option here to either add or remove substances from the banned or regulated list. So it stays updated. And this allows industry and scientists to work together to solve the problems of hazards in our life. And then it can also limit the toxics in recycling feedstocks so that this material that has questionable chemistry will not go into the recycling pathway. And therefore, what comes out of the recycling pathway will then be safer. Safe in, safe out. So moving on. The benefits, let's just look at the past. We took lead out of our fuel, we took lead out of our paint, and now over that transition, the gasoline didn't cost more, our cars and trucks still ran very well, and our paint in our homes is so much safer, and we don't have to pay in our lives, in our children's health from lead paint. We can move on and be safe in our homes. Another benefit is this map here of the United States showing you the widespread, you heard it in the previous testimony, the widespread of EPR laws across the United States. Many states have different kinds of EPR legislation, and if we don't begin on this, then we will be behind in being able to have our products sold in those other states, because we will have a reputation that says, don't buy from New Hampshire, you won't meet the other states' regulations, so all those businesses are going to say, sorry, you're New Hampshire, we'd rather do business with a state, a company in a state that has better laws already on the books, and we know what they're doing. We can trust what those other states are doing. So the industry benefits from no toxics in packaging. Forbes magazine, it's a great article about green certification boosts sales over competitors, a huge amount. So when an industry says it's green, it's non-toxic, it's sustainable in its practices, they get more business, not less. Hypertherm is a great example of that. Their policy to cut toxics at all stages simplify their operations and increase their sales. Municipal waste budgets, we've heard a bit about this, but I can't underestimate how important this is. Less toxic packaging means more sales to recycling markets, so that when we have our transfer stations take the carefully and labeled and properly arranged recycled materials, aluminum, glass especially, those easy identify ones, perhaps some of the plastics. When they identify those and they know that they're non-toxic, then they can sell those to markets at higher prices. And those sales differences are substantial. So now that helps my town budget and helps my taxes stay as low as possible. We can save with the reuse of non-toxics in food service. So when we have a business that would otherwise have waste materials in takeout materials, instead if they shift to reuse, they would get a benefit from that. That would be part of not paying any stewardship fees for having waste materials. But the bonus is that simply having the reusable materials actually saves them $2,000 to $22,000 per year, depending on how big the restaurant is. So the restaurant is saving money twice. Once, by not having to buy the stuff in the first place. Second, not having to buy a potential stewardship fee. And then now they're really in good states. So the restaurants should like this process. Now, we can move on to another benefit. Confident companies. Every one of the companies that I've shown you on this picture are small companies. I'm not sure of the laws and the regulations and the limits for commerce and budgets in each one of these companies, but they do way under $1 million of business, under 100,000 for some of them. So they're probably not going to be impacted by a number of bills, depending on how the bill is structured. But here's the advantage that they gain from having EPR in New Hampshire, is the reputation. In a business, reputation means so much more, and it really counts for their personal value, but it also counts on their bottom line. And so having New Hampshire as an EPR state improves the reputation of all of these companies because they sell online way beyond New Hampshire and also within New Hampshire. These other things is having an EPR bill signals the packaging vendors that each of these people has to call up and say, I need so much to put in my bone meal broth. I love Vernon Family, it's a wonderful farm. But when they want to buy a bunch of packages, they can't negotiate with this company about, well, what's in your package, what's in your container? They want to buy from somebody that they know they can trust. And when they say, oh, you're selling to New Hampshire, oh yeah, we got it covered. We sell to New Hampshire, we sell to all the EPR states because we know what you guys expect and we're going to give you a good price. So that's how they can make their businesses more efficient. For whether it's personal care products, T-shirts, you name it, they're going to get a good deal. Moving on. Confident consumers, when we shop in New Hampshire, and we're buying New Hampshire-made things, New Hampshire packaged things, we will be confident whether we have a little baby in the bin or whether we have, we're out there, shopping for ourselves. And also when we're shopping online. And remember, New Hampshire businesses do a lot of online market, and we want to be able to advertise that market of safety and reliability online. So some special features in a smart EPR. These are almost near the end here. It will have special considerations for those small businesses that I just described a few minutes ago. They don't have a lot of resources to verify the packaging chemistry and sources, to track the packaging fate. So I'm pretty sure that the legislation will have considerations for very small businesses so that they don't have to bear a huge burden of this, but they can actually generate from the advantages of having this reputation as being a state that's protective. They would reward businesses by already using green packaging that are least toxic, reusable, natural materials, easy to compost, and safe to recycle. There are businesses, such as some of those personal care products I cited earlier and some of those other farms that I've cited. Those people have already done their homework. They have already gone as sustainable as you possibly can. So they should get rewarded for that. They took it on the chin to do it just because it's the right thing to do. Now they can get a financial reward for that or, generally benefit from it overall. So in conclusion, I say, first of all, we are paying extra for packaging. We're paying for too much packaging. I now have to buy one of my Dover green bags to put all this stuff in. Another bag, another $10, each week to put this stuff in something. So already I'm paying too much for too much packaging. And in terms of my body and my grandchildren's bodies, we're paying too much in toxics. All right? I showed you that the statistics are frightening. So EPR is a way that we can begin to solve these problems. Won't do it all, but we can begin. It's a key part of the healthy economies because it will cut waste. It will significantly cut down roadside waste, 70% roadside waste reduction in EPR states. It will cut the toxics in our lives, and it will save us then many costs for ourselves and our municipalities. Thank you for listening.
And thank you for your very informative testimony. Are there questions? Yes, please, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much for that really comprehensive slideshow. My question is, I know that you have a deep background in this realm. knowing that there are 6 other states who have comprehensive EPR laws, some of them about to kick in, of those states, have you taken a look at any of them?
The
And
o-
are there any that, because the states are wildly different, the economy of, and the constituencies of California are, wildly different from New Hampshire. But Maine, our neighbor, we have roughly the same population, same climate, same consumer base. There's also New Jersey. Who do you think is a good model for where New Hampshire could look for guidance on developing our own
Well,
EPR?
Thank you so much for the question, Senator. I have only had time to look at Maine's, so I have not had a chance to do a cross-check on the others. And I would think that there is time if we were to develop legislation, there's time and there's more expertise for fine-tuning the legislation. But if you look at the Maine's law, I can include, I will update my slide to give you the exact legislative number without the two little, the exact legislative item in Maine, and you can read.
It's 2145, so
Yeah.
got it up here. I was wondering your analysis of it, yeah.
Right, and it seems very straightforward, and it seems like it has been successful. I would have to, I can't speak for the Mainers, but that one is easy to understand, easy to read, practical. I would start there, but I would just start there. But I would say we have enough to write practical legislation that's appropriate for New Hampshire. We have enough now to write that legislation. Thank you. Other
Further
questions?
I have no, we don't typically take questions from the floor. Sorry? Yes, if you'd like to, okay. But I do have a question. I'm more concerned about the toxic components of some of these wastes than may have previously been concerned about. Could you, do you think EPR legislation would effectively cause us, both manufacturers and consumers, to take a harder look at what we are putting on our landfills, knowing our past history of sometimes overlooking these type of things?
I think we have to be, I think EPR legislation and this charge of this committee is focused on taking the toxics out at the start of the process. And so you're dealing with the water going into the bathtub. You're keeping toxics out of water going into the waste bathtub, per se, in EPR. And that will keep the drain of the bathtub of waste, from having fewer toxics in it. Unfortunately, the landfills have legacy toxics in them. So I would encourage you to work on other legislation associated with landfill toxics and so on. However, controlling what goes into recycling feedstocks is critical, and limiting how you define recycling is critical in an EPR. Because if it's not carefully designed and carefully limited, and I don't know if I'm sure, but I think Maine has something about safe recycling, least toxic recycling, something about that, because if you don't define the nature of what you mean by the word recycling and recycled content, then we end up with this bottle coming out of this mess. If you don't define it, this is what you're going to get. Because this is the easiest path. Who wouldn't want to just dump this into a bin and have something that looks like plastic, smells like plastic, but is much more than just plastic, go into this recycled content, and then we say we've done our job. We did not do our job because we didn't take the toxics out as feedstock for plastic recycling. Does that help?
That does help very much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Further questions? I want to thank you for this very, I got to say that there are points here I have not considered before, such as alternative packaging being a growth industry for New Hampshire. These are exciting and potential ideas. Thank you. And finally, I would like to hear from Cindy Heath. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank
Oh.
you. Thank you, Representative Parshall and honorable members of the committee. My name is Cindy Heath, and I live in Cornish, New Hampshire. I am the convener about 3 years ago of the New Hampshire Network Plastics Working Group. And the working group is a nonpartisan, all-volunteer organization founded in 2021 to help reduce plastic waste and pollution in New Hampshire. And I also volunteer at the Cornish Recycling Center during the winter months, so I get to see firsthand the waste management practices in my town, which is very informative. And my professional background includes community planning and most recently providing technical support to municipalities in the Upper Valley who want to implement food scrap diversion programs. And before I begin, I'd like to just build on something that Cynthia mentioned in her excellent testimony. And I have looked at the Maine law, EPR law, and some of the other companion laws, not very recently, but one of the things that really impressed me about Maine's work in this area is that they have a very extensive list of what they call chemicals of concern. And given what Cynthia was mentioning about turning off the flow at the tap, that is their entry into how to define what types of chemicals can go into packaging that is sold in Maine. I don't know if it's part of the EPR law, but I know if you were to look for reference at chemicals of concern in Maine, you would see a very long list, and that is a comprehensive way for the state to define what goes into the packaging that's sold in Maine. So the Plastics Working Group members are from 44 towns in every region of the state, and we have to date implemented more than 138 actions relating to policy, citizens' engagement, and systems change at the local level. These actions have directly and indirectly impacted approximately 10,000 people in our state. We work in partnership with local and state government, businesses, schools, and community groups to achieve our goals of reducing plastic waste and pollution in New Hampshire. Extended producer responsibility legislation is very, very high on our list of solutions to this growing problem. The history of EPR goes back to 1990, actually, beginning in Germany. The concept has been tested and researched on a global scale for more than 3 decades. In New Hampshire, municipalities, businesses, and consumers are already doing their part. Some of the things that are already going on in our state that relate to this legislation are in solving this problem are that municipalities are currently investing heavily in recycling and its infrastructure. Municipalities are implementing pay-as-you-throw programs. Municipalities are piloting, trying to incorporate hard-to-recycle items like textiles, polystyrene, also known as styrofoam, batteries, and plastic film into their operations. Service clubs and sustainability committees are hosting community swap events. Nonprofit organizations are championing zero waste campaigns. Entrepreneurs are opening refill stations and zero waste grocery stores. Restaurants and small businesses are offering reusable and sustainable packaging. Residents are practicing low and zero waste shopping efforts. And finally, community groups are incorporating zero waste principles into event management. EPR legislation simply requires producers to participate in expanding existing programs to increase waste diversion and recycling, thus reducing municipal tipping and transportation fees. And it also requires businesses and producers to commit to ensuring the safe disposal of toxic products and packaging that are currently entering our municipal waste streams. The Plastics Working Group supports a multifaceted approach to the waste management challenges New Hampshire is currently facing. As noted in Dr. Walter's testimony, EPR legislation with appropriations to support the Department of Environmental Services oversight will address toxins leaching into landfills and polluting our air and water, as well as reduce the volume of more than 1.5 million tons of waste. And I recently read something that it's actually closer to 2 million being processed by our New Hampshire municipalities currently. Of particular concern are the harmful effects on children of the toxins in food packaging. Clark, in his earlier testimony, outlined the minimal impact on consumers for the costs of products included in EPR legislation. An earlier testimony by Christine Baber of the Dover Plastics Reduction Group demonstrated bipartisan support for the idea that taxpayers shouldn't have to pay for the cleanup of plastic waste created by companies. Current waste management trends consider the disposal of products that could be reused or recycled as a waste of valuable resources. As many countries around the world and a growing number of states have shown, we can work together with producers to implement fair EPR legislation that incentivizes the use of packaging and products that are refillable, reusable, compostable, and recyclable. Sustainable packaging alternatives are currently available and widely in use by producers in Canada, Europe, and the US. So there is no need for producers, small or large, to reinvent the wheel when it comes to transitioning to safe biodegradable packaging and responsible product life cycle management. Producers in these jurisdictions are complying with the law, and research has shown that companies can realize substantial cost savings by transitioning to sustainable packaging. As long as recycling is convenient for the consumer in the form of multiple drop-off locations, municipal site recycling rates have been shown to be as high as 75%. And according to the research by the Recycling Partnership, recycling rates for paper specifically showed dramatic increases with EPR in several U.S. states. And my written testimony has a couple of informative charts, but I'll just highlight one statistic from one of these charts, and you'll have that when I give you the written testimony. In Colorado, the recycling rate went from 21% to 70% with EPR legislation. That's a huge, huge increase. The Recycling Partnership also reports that the economic value of recycled materials is significant for the states in its study. And again, just to cite Colorado, the economic value of their recycled material turned out to be $91 million statewide, a significant, significant increase. Further, efforts by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation have resulted in 11 leading brands, retailers, and packaging companies working towards using 100% reusable, recyclable, or compostable packaging by 2025 or sooner. Amcor, eCover, Evian, L'Oreal, Mars, M&S, Pepsi Company, the Coca-Cola Company, Unilever, Walmart, and Werner and Metz. These companies together represent more than 6 million tons of plastic packaging per year. Turning to New Hampshire, the 2022 Department of Environmental Services Solid Waste Management Plan cites EPR legislation as a strategy to address several goals in its 10-year plan. And my written testimony does have the citings of where these items are located in the solid waste management plan. But in the first goal, the goal to reduce the quantity of solid waste generated has the recommendation to explore EPR legislation and programs. The second goal, to reduce the toxicity of the solid waste stream, has explore legislation that would establish waste disposal bans and EPR for items such as rechargeable batteries, electronic devices, paint, and sharps. And also exploring legislation to address the use of toxic chemicals in products, such as the use of PFAS in carpeting, clothing, upholstery, and food packaging. So this is well documented in our solid waste plan as a recommendation. And finally, goal number 3 is to maximize the diversion of residential, commercial, and industrial solid waste from disposal. And so evaluating mandatory recycling laws and EPR programs is one of the recommendations for legislation in that goal. So there's plenty of support for the committee to move ahead with advancing this towards a legislative review in our existing approved current solid waste management plan. And finally, there's a recommendation to explore product stewardship and EPR programs for a number of other items, including plastics and some of the other items that I mentioned, which are further described in the written testimony. According to the Product Stewardship Institute, there are approximately 100 EPR policies across 33 states as of 2022. So we know that the EPR legislation is broad. There's more than enough data for policymakers to draw from to develop legislation that works for us in New Hampshire. These policies focus on 15 different types of products, including products that are difficult to recycle, like electronics, paint, carpet, mattresses, fluorescent lighting, product packaging, and pharmaceuticals. We know New Hampshire can do better. We know that EPR means less waste and less toxins in our waste stream. That reduces potential harm to citizens and the environment, especially children. We know that EPR can help save dollars for our communities. And I would just ask you before I close to think about your own recycling center or transfer station in your town and how it might benefit from extra funding to do things that it cannot afford to do now. And I know in Cornish, that is a significant challenge for us. We want to do better, but financially it's very difficult. In closing, I urge the committee to use the information that's readily available from existing global and state EPR experiences to recommend the submission of EPR legislation in this session. We believe New Hampshire businesses, organizations, government, and individuals are ready for this important step in our state and can effectively work together to protect the health of our citizens and the environment we call home. The New Hampshire Plastics Working Group stands ready to assist in any way the committee believes would be beneficial to advance your knowledge throughout the legislative process. Thank you.
And thank you for your testimony. Questions? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'd like to see if anybody else would like to come forward at this time. Please fill out a little pink card at your convenience. I don't need it right away, but make sure before we conclude here. Thank you. Thank you so much. And usual, introduce yourself. So.
Thank you. I will be brief. For the record, my name is Jody Grimbalis. I'm a lobbyist here in Concord, and I work with the American Chemistry Council, in which there's a plastics division. I wasn't aware of kind of the focus turning as it did today with a lot of the testimony on the plastics community. And I guess I would ask, I just received a copy of a potential draft piece of legislation that I think is based on New York and Maine, which there have been concerns about from the industry. I know I had spoken to the chairman about potentially coming forward and bringing someone in to talk from an industry perspective, but we had kind of thought it would be more about advanced recycling, and then that wasn't going to be part of it. But I would offer that I would like to have that opportunity. I don't know if you have any more meetings in the future, or if it may be waiting till next legislative session, but I do think, as the prior speaker said, there's an opportunity for people to work together here. And industry has to be part and at that table. And I don't know if that's the case, and I think it should be. So I would make that offer. I'm certainly not the expert in those matters, but I would at least bring them to this committee or to future committees, because I think at some point, from what I understand in Maine and New York, that hasn't been the case, and it hasn't necessarily worked well. So I will leave it at that, and I will let me know what you think.
Yes, thank you for your brief testimony. Just a point of information, perhaps. I think that all of us see that this has to be a cooperative effort from both industry, the producers, and the consumers, and this is our opportunity to reset the unspoken rules that have pretty much governed us in the past when it comes to our waste flow. However, I cannot see this being effective without industry having a voice in it. So I would expect that if and when our committee decides that we would like to continue this discussion, I know there are very many organizations, the NRRA, the Municipal Organization for New Hampshire, number of organizations that we have, because of our limited time, we have not been able to call. I would hope that if legislation goes before the committee, we'll have the opportunity to further dig into all of these issues, including the issues that you have.
Great.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
Further testimony? Okay. Seeing none, perhaps I can once again garner the thoughts of our committee.
I'd like to thank everybody who testified today. I think we got some really good information. Mr. Corson kind of convinced me in a sense that with his testimony, my committee is Environment and Agriculture, and I feel that maybe my committee should be, hear some of this testimony. But overall, I think I would like to see more time to see what happens in Maine. I don't see the urgency. I'd like to see them, let's see, so that we know what happens with all parties. I'm concerned about that. The Advanced Recycling Law, Senate Bill 367, I believe has eased up the municipal burden somewhat. I'd like to see more emphasis on an awareness campaign for both producers and consumers. And I think with that information, the market approach, rather than having this forced on companies, let the free market determine once they've been educated. People may start using cardboard containers instead of plastic, or bringing, like the chairman has a container today, rather than buying a plastic bottle. That type of approach, buying biodegradable packaging, products that use that. So that's kind of where I am on this.
And may I ask our respected representative, do you feel that the discussion and testimony will become before ENA, which is most likely where any legislation would go? I think that's a safe bet. Do you think that will happen without us recommending further legislation?
I don't know. It's come before us already, so I think it will come back.
Yes, I think it would come back. I think it may take some time to come back because I know of no current legislation in the hopper. And the soonest would come back would be 2024. However, if we do recommend further legislation and submit it to the OLS before November 7th, we have the opportunity to ask for further testimony in front of the committee. And at the end, the E&A committee may decide to not pursue this. They can always retain it or whatever. But I think that just having that possibility opens up this issue to keep all of our resources on the table. Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, with all due respect to my colleague, I think that history has shown us that the free market approach to handling public health has been wildly unsuccessful. And I use in this particular instance BPA. So BPA developed 120 years ago, was used in baby bottles. It was used to line cans that have our vegetables in them and other products that we eat. And it is a very, very dangerous toxin that leaches out of those products and into human bodies. And without direction from government, we would still be feeding our children BPA-laden bottles. Now, you can't buy a bottle in pretty much any store without finding a sticker or a sign on it that says BPA free, which lets the consumer know that this particular producer has taken the information that BPA, the plastics chemical BPA, has been removed from this particular product and it is safe for human use. So, you know, this was tighter standards that was, you know, the government had to put on producers because it was much more profitable to do nothing. So, and once their product goes out the door, no, they did not care whether children were, you know, being exposed to BPA, whether we were being exposed to BPA. That was of no concern because once they made the product, went out the door, got sold to a, you know, to a supermarket, and it's out of my hands, out of my hands. I'm making money off of it. So this is why it's important for us to, with seriousness, understand the public health dangers in doing nothing. So in not being proactive, we ended up here in New Hampshire with a massive, massive amount of PFAS contamination. My community in particular, because we have a landfill in our community that was unlined. And no one thought like, well, you know, we're not required to do it. Nobody's making us do it. It would probably be a good idea, but why? It costs more money. Now we have leachate everywhere. Subsequently, you can't put in a landfill without lining it because we made a government rule. So it has long been an unfortunate byproduct of a free market is to concentrate only on profit, which great, that's what they do. But uncontrolled, unregulated free markets are not free. It's not free because who pays for it? We do. So we're going to pay the medical bills of the people who are exposed to BPAs and all of the issues that come along with that. Who's going to pay for all of these massive plastic products and the mercury that went into thermometers, which the government had to rein in? Who's going to pay for the electronics piling up? Who's going to pay for all of these products that we are consuming and using? We do. We pay for them. Coca-Cola's not going to pay for them. P&G is not going to pay for them. We're going to pay for them. So all this extended producer responsibility concept does is bring everybody into the same space of shared responsibility. So yes, we have a responsibility to purchase products that do less harm. However, if there aren't enough of them out there, we don't have a lot of choice. How free is that? Not very. So we have already, Canada has been operating their extended producer responsibility laws since the 1990s. They have a population of 38.25 million people. So that's the equivalent of 29 New Hampshires. So since the 1990s, they're way ahead of us on this. California, New Jersey, Washington, Colorado, Maine, all of these states have also enacted extended producer responsibilities because they understand that it is a shared responsibility between the consumers communities, our municipalities, and the producers who are bringing products into our municipalities that are not 100% usable. There's packaging, and we have to deal with that. The total of all those states is 63.34 million consumers, plus the 38.25 million consumers. So just in the United States, we have a consumer population, the equivalent of 45 New Hampshires. So, and then most of these laws also take into account the European article numbers, which Europe is also far ahead of us on this. So producers understand this is coming, and they would love to not have to do it now, because it costs a little more. It costs more money, It costs more money. I would love to not have to pay the $250 that it's going to cost to clean out my chimney, because it's expensive, and I have a car payment, and my car is actually doing some funky things, so it has to be dropped off this week. So $250 is like, I really don't want to have to spend that money, but I know that if I don't spend that money, then I am going to have a potential hazard in my house, and I haven't taken care of it. So by not participating in extended producer responsibilities, we're just postponing the hazard. And we all know when you work with a municipal project and you put off doing the municipal project, it never gets less expensive. Absolutely not. Never gets less expensive. So we have an opportunity right now to participate with the producers to find a space that works the best for us here in New Hampshire. And we are not making it up. There's so many other states, countries that have already done this and have data for us already. So I think we can all agree that we have some very toxic chemicals already floating around in our watersheds, and we have, shut down some things that had been putting air pollution into our communities. And before this gets more out of hand, we need to make a good faith effort at joining with producers to figure out how they can be responsible for what they're coming in and how we can join them in that responsibility. So I would propose that we particularly take a look at the New Jersey proposal I think there's a lot of aspects of the New Jersey EPR that would that we could actually pluck out that would be appropriate for New Hampshire, and also look at, so Maine, one of the things they did was put together, what are they calling it? A sustainability office. And the sustainability office, from the read I have of it from the legislation, operates very similarly to our EFA office. So it's a contract. So the sustainability office is a contracted vendor, if you will, from the Department of Environmental Services, and the money to sustain that comes from some of the responsibility money from the producers that are coming in, and that helps to manage the program. So that's just a tiny overview. I know there are a lot more details than that, but I do think that there are some models that it would be a great benefit to New Hampshire to look at these before it costs us even more money with pollution mitigation. Because that, I promise you, is more expensive.
Thank you. My thoughts on this are that I would like to see this issue stay alive. I did share with you a draft piece of EPR legislation, and I do not see that as a final answer, but I do see it as something that would come before the E&A committee to keep the conversation alive, to keep us. I feel like I've had a tremendous education over the last 3 weeks here, and I would like that opportunity to go before the E&A committee as well. So I would really hate to think that the report that I've been commissioned to draft would be the final word for a couple of years. I would much prefer it seeing it as one step forward that includes recommended legislation that I can't imagine I have to imagine would be seriously amended, but at the end, something which we would all be able to equally like or dislike, something for everybody. That's not going to happen if we bury this right now in a report. So I strongly advocate moving forward, submitting legislation to OLS, and getting this before the E&A committee so that we do not have to wait another year to attack our waste flow problem. I will also add, I don't know if you've noticed in the legislation that I drafted, that there's no mention of advanced recycling. There's no mention of bottle bills. There's a mention of toxic substances. All of these would have to be negotiated, and all of these would have to be considered with more minds than just my own, if we're going to have something that works for everybody. I strongly recommend, and we do have a quorum here today, and I think it'd be appropriate to take a vote on whether or not we do want to submit legislation to OLS in this matter. So as I am serving as clerk, please go ahead. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So are you making a motion to adopt this language with opportunity for rewrite, or as is? Like, is there once it's submitted, are you submitting as is, or with opening that 10-day space for editing if there's other information?
Could I just say yes?
Yes?
I'm open.
Okay, thank you.
I am open to either. I really think that either way is not really significant because this is more of a doorstop or a bookmark than it is an actual finished product. So I would be more than open to either front loading it before it goes to OLS if comments are to be made, or submitting it and letting it come before E&A and then the Senate and having it decided there. I could go either direction. And I would welcome your thoughts on that.
I was told earlier in this committee that this was formed, that this committee was to look at saving the burden to, and saving money to the towns by reducing the amount of waste that goes into the landfills. And I've heard so much more than that today about toxicities. I mean, that I really honestly wasn't aware of some of the stuff I heard today, but I think we're getting off a little bit from what the topic was originally. And that's where I'm at with that.
Should I add that my original impetus on this bill was to, because my own landfill or transfer station was self-sustaining and be able to recycle the plastic that was coming into it until the plastic market collapsed. And now they're talking about significant increases in my own hometown. So reducing municipal costs is very dear to me. And I think that is addressed somewhat in the draft legislation as well. The testimony that I've heard today only increases my urgency to see something passed, not just for the financial aspects of it, but for the environmental aspects of it. Does that answer?
Yep.
Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm happy to provide a little clarification because in our charge, our study extended producer responsibility as a mechanism for meeting the waste reduction goals established in RSA 149M. So when we look at the waste reduction goals of 149M, one of those original goals was to divert at least 40% of solid waste from disposal by the year 2000. And unfortunately, we have not met that. One of the other goals in RSA 149M is number one, source reduction, reduced a generation of waste, diversion, recovered discarded resources and avoid disposal, and then disposal, landfill or incinerate items that can't be reduced or diverted. So in fact, there is a chart on 149M, which is an inverted pyramid that shows this is the most preferred method, and the most preferred method here is source reduction. So which is what we're talking about here. And the least preferred methods to meet the goals of 149M are landfills, incineration, and waste to energy. Those are, in that order, with the least, of course, being landfills, because we have heard today that unchecked landfills and overburdened landfills, particularly when we don't even know what's coming in from other states, gives us a lot of toxics that we end up having to deal with. Again, that costs us a lot of money. So source reduction, recycling and reuse, and composting is right in the center. But the most preferred for RSA 149M was source reduction, which what is our charge with this committee is to figure out how to do some source reduction. This program that highlights and breaks down RSA 149M, underlines that's what we're here to do. And we have other bills that are still, I know one of them stuck in finance right now, but we do have some other groups within the legislature who are working on addressing the prospects of chemical recycling, which is its own. We got a little taste of it today from Cynthia, who, just gave us a little insight into it, but that's well beyond the scope of this committee. And there's actually other committees who are working on that right now, like this not this moment, but in this session. So, you know, if we stick to our charge and go straight from the statute, and possible targets for EPR include packaging, single-use plastics, beverage containers, electronic waste, batteries, automotive waste, and hazardous waste, and use those, or a couple of those, to input into possibly this proposed legislation from Representative Parcell, that we have a solid foot to stand on in bringing something forward, and we have met the objectives, I think, given the very limited scope of House Bill 253, because we have, met all of the other criteria. So we're down to number 5 of HB 253.
If I could return this one moment. I think that more eyes, you asked me a question earlier, would I want to see further drafts before it's been to OLS or after? I almost think that at this point, maybe further eyes on it and further testimony may, well, hopefully, will make it a stronger piece of legislation. I would like to, that's to try to get a straw poll here. I think I know how you feel. Do you feel like it may be appropriate at this time to submit further legislation to keep it in front of the committee process?
I believe something will come up.
Okay, and how, may I ask, to be very frank, how do you think it will come up?
There's nothing, like you said, there's something in finance right now, there's other bills out there.
I think that was advanced recycling, though, that was in finance.
No, I'm sorry if there was some confusion in my explanation. This is the only space where we're really dealing with the extended producer responsibility. Some of the other topics that have come up that are out of the scope, but that have come up here, are being addressed in other committees. So my statement was that some of those things that are out of our scope are being addressed, but within our scope, there is nothing right now, which is why we're here. So, we have to suggest, in fact, we are charged with suggesting possible legislation and/or rules for implementing approaches that would be readily adaptable to New Hampshire and may propose topics for even further study. So we are charged in our statute to suggest possible legislation. That's what was signed by the governor. So to meet the goal, to meet our obligation, we have done parts 1. We have almost finished part 2. We have done parts 3, 4, and we are not done with 5. So I don't know that it's an option not to bring something forward, because it was not put as an option. So we have to suggest something, which is why I asked if Representative Parcell would be open to any changes to what he has proposed, because I didn't bring a proposal for today. But I would like to participate in any of the redraft, because, what comes forward out of this committee is our work. So
Would you support it with a redraft?
I guess I would like to see education to the consumer, things like that. At least put, I'd like to have my concerns in your report or your draft. This is the first meeting I've been on this. I'm not exactly sure how this works. But I do have concerns with it. Yeah, I think the draft was kind of one-sided. I know Representative Brulard had called me, and he has the same concerns that I do. I can't speak for him, but like the senator said, I don't know, maybe we have to put something forward here, but I just want my concerns noted in your report, I guess.
I certainly think it's appropriate to have all the concerns noted in the report, and I would not think I mean, I hope you know that I would not consider otherwise. However, going back to 5, I'm also really feeling that we have a bill that passed the House on consent, passed the Senate on consent, and I see both these as a real hunger to learn more when it comes to education, to learn more on the behalf of on behalf of the legislature. I think consumers have had quite a bit of time to educate themselves, and I think if you look right now, there's even an effort. Well, I've seen Delta Airlines a lot lately and how they're going to be carbon neutral by 2050. I think that there's real effort in educating the consumers from the standpoint of industry. I think it's the legislators that might benefit from further education, which is why I would love to see something go forward. And maybe could I ask, could we work together? Because I did not see this as one-sided, of course, but it is my perspective. I don't deny that. Could we work together in order to come up with something to satisfy our 5th requirement? Would you feel?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, so while we're digging into this, where, because we can do some of this work right now, where are the spaces within the proposal that are giving you heartburn, so that we can, like, maybe we can talk through some of these right now. To be perfectly honest, Representative Parshall, I am not able to see an education, like a consumer education component. Is that what you're talking about? Yeah. So I have not, I controlled F my way through this and can't find it. So is that something you would be open to adding? Because it looks like from the packaging reduction organization, which sounds very similar to the way Maine came forward, that I know in Maine, an education piece for consumers is part of their process. That is some of the charge of their, what are they calling it? Hold on a second. Okay, Vermont calls theirs the Stewardship Council, but very much the same. It's just, whoever the separate entity is. So yeah, what are the specific spots that maybe we can dig into?
I know in this room there's an urgency for this. I'd like to see how it plays out in Maine for all parties. I don't see the urgency in it. I think with education, we live in a free market society. I think that, I really believe that if people were educated, instead of getting a plastic bottle of water, you'd bring a container from home. I think you'd buy the cardboard packaged container instead of the plastic. I think you might buy something that's packaged biodegradable. Let the market determine that. I believe if people were educated, I believe that would help. I just don't think it should be forced on producers. And let's find out what Maine's doing. Maine would be the closest one to us. I don't think New Hampshire and New Jersey would be a fair fit. I don't think California certainly wouldn't be. I think Maine would. I think Maine is close to New Hampshire. That's what I'd like to see is let it play out a little bit and see how it affects all parties.
Okay, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, may I respond? Thank you. Thank you very much. I do want to bring back into this this discussion that our free market economy is not entirely free. In fact, we have a significant number of regulations about how certain products can be made and sold. We, for instance, measure how much non-flammable material goes into products that go on our children. And when we had, recognized that these non-flammable components of children's pajamas were actually poisoning them, we, as the government, stepped in and said, no, we're not going to do that anymore. You're going to have to take that out. Same thing with BPA. You're going to have to take that out. When, when cigarettes even used to be unfiltered, and before we really wrapped our brains around the fact that, smoking is something that actually kills you, we, put filters on. We have done incremental things to make our communities, our citizens, and our environment safer. We have rules and regulations about how much toxin you can spew in the air. That's why we have a Environmental Services Protection Commission. It's not a free for all. It is a monitored space. And so, which is why we have health regulations for restaurants. We don't let the free market rule our public health. And when we do, we end up suffering, which is how we came across the fact that PFAS has been poisoning people all across my community, the Merrimack community. I know that you have a colleague in the House who has PFAS-related cancer. So it's there. It's happening. We have to deal with it. And so it's not a free-for-all. We get to put the bumpers on this lane. And the question is, what do the bumpers look like? There can't be no bumpers, because without any bumpers, then we're just paying for it in our municipal tax bills. We're paying for it at the state level. So we're going to pay for it, all of it. So we want to share the cost. It seems, the longer we wait, the more we pay. And quite frankly, I don't want to keep paying for somebody else's, laziness or, profit margins, because we're not asking them to do what they are asked to do in other states and in Canada. Like, they're already making these products for other people, but we don't get them because we're not asking for them. So this is where I want to just make sure that we're all on the same page about there being bumpers on the free market,
I understand that totally, and the things you're talking about are the products themselves and the safety of the products. Yes. And we're commissioned, I believe, for the packaging to make less of it go into the landfills, not to make the products themselves safer. Am I wrong in saying that?
The packaging is the product. That is
Well,
all
you were
part of the
talking
product.
About flammable clothing for children. And
Yeah.
That's not the packaging, that's the product itself.
Okay. My apologies for not having a more specific, my intention on using that as an example is to demonstrate that we have government spaces where we can say to producers of products, and packaging is a product, that you can't put this kind of chemicals into these products. So a better example, if we want to stay with fidelity to the issue at hand, is BPA inside of cans where you get your corn, beans, green beans, garbanzo beans, soup, where we were buying baby bottles. And baby bottles, it's a rare occasion to buy one. They come in big packs. And those were laden with BPA until we stepped in and said, nope. So now what we're talking about is all of the plastic and all of the packaging that goes on those improved products. We're talking about big jugs of laundry detergent. We're talking about metals that come in our electronics. We're talking about paint. We're talking about all kinds of things. So recognizing that the packaging is part of the product.
So we are speaking, if we do submit, and I'm just going to go ahead with this, assumption for the moment here. We need to have something more about education within this bill. Would that make it more of a savory situation?
Yeah.
Okay, how do we get that in there? Do we work together, you and I, the three of us? Or would you like me to just take that on? I think Maine has something like this. We could model it somewhat after Maine.
Yeah, I think that you have some strong feelings about what it would look like for the education component, and who pays for that. Like, is it something that the manufacturers, pay into a state fund? Is it something that is part of their own marketing campaigns? There's all ways of figuring, does the state take this on? Like, who does the education? What does it look like? And, would you be open to, figuring that piece of this out during the redraft?
I'd rather leave it in your hands.
I'm happy to do either, and I would like to submit it to you for your approval, though, and we should at least have some discussion on it. I want to make sure that it meets your, I'd like to try to be fair. Of course, we all have our own perspective. Can I point out one other thing I think might be somewhat relevant? I don't have the feeling right now that we really are dictating to the industry, to the producers, insofar as many of the producers, just about all the producers we have heard from, have endorsed the idea of at least beginning the process of EPA legislation. I think they're doing that because they see it as it's on the horizon for them already with so many other places, and they realize that it's just a matter of time here, and they would love to have a seat at the table. So they are endorsing this, and I think that's a very positive thing to have them on board with it. And I would sincerely like to take advantage of that. And the other thing which really strikes me off very heavily is that when it comes to paper and and we know what Colorado did, they increased their recycling rates to 23 to 70%. I think that's an amazing, and I'm sure they did that with some education. But it also gave the consumers something to work with. Just like this legislation here, I know it's been difficult for the people that come and testified because we don't have any legislation in front of them, and they're used to having legislation in front of them. This is a study committee, but if we get legislation in front of them, we can have these different groups come in and say, we like this, we don't like that. And it will encourage a deeper discussion than I think what we've been able to have here. And also more relevant to a broader number of people who already support the concept of EPR. So that's my thoughts right there. May I go ahead and start drafting education, and what else? Are there other areas? Or areas that we might want to remove? I'm also open to that. I think that anything we do may be further amended down the line, so I'm very open to whatever we need to get this on to the next step.
Mr. Chair?
Please.
Thank you. With regards to what we heard from Ms. Grumblis, there is actually documentation from the American Chemistry Council on their working with California, and they have outlined the objections that they had in the process. So we have, we have a document here that says this is where we're struggling, So, I mean, that information is not unknown. So we do have that. So that's, one thing we can factor into our document because we know where some of the producers are coming from, and where they're struggling with. So we want to be able to be cooperative with all partners.
And I also know you've been taking very copious notes today. And if you'd like, again, to draft them into, very often these reports also have a minority report element to them. And I would certainly welcome that, or if you want to incorporate it in the regular report, I'm happy either way on that, whatever you would like to go with that.
All right.
But I really do think it's important you hear all these voices, and we continue to hear them. So what I'm gathering right now, and correct me, please, if I'm wrong, and I hope I'm not, if we are able to redraft this legislation, this proposed legislation that OLS has not even seen yet, but if we're able to redraft that to something that does include something about education and perhaps some other issues, then we can go ahead and submit this, and knowing that it will probably be even further amended by E&A or whatever committee it's assigned to. Are we pretty much in consensus on that, do you feel?
Yeah, and would you mind if I could email you just like a small report with my concerns and add that into it?
More than mine, I'd be very grateful for that.
Okay.
Well, I move that we accept, did you put a number on it? Okay, accept the proposed legislation that came out of this summer committee, an act to require companies selling, offering for sale, or distributing products contained in packaging to minimize consumer packaging by prescribed goals set by the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services. Accept it as written, pending, with opportunities for this committee to add changes, that this go forward to the speaker for exception, for assignment into the LSR list. I think I worded that appropriately.
We have a second?
Yes.
Great. Now, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, great.
Okay, I think that concludes our business, not only for today, but for, not the foreseeable future, because we'll need to be in touch as far as getting this redrafted before we even submit it to OLS, but.
Can I send you my edits by the end of the week?
Oh, please do, please do.
Thanks.
So, that sounds great.
Perfect.
And thank you very much, and once again, thank you to all those that testified and also sat through the testimony. Oh, motion to adjourn, we don't need that, do we? All in favor, stand up.